Welcome back to Horrifying Stories. By nature, wolves are afraid of humans enough to instinctively run away from them. They normally only attack humans for two reasons: when their habitat is threatened or when they have contracted rabies. But what most people don't realize is that this innate fear of humans can be slowly overcome by wolves before one could even notice it. In this episode, we talk about another savage animal attack. The Delventhal family were just making every remaining second of their 9-day canoe adventure count, when suddenly a man-eating wolf woke them up in the middle of the night. This is their horrifying story. Viewer discretion is advised. "35-year-old Tom Delventhal worked as an actor and drama teacher at Carnegie Mellon University. Married to Tracy, also 35 years old, who taught acting classes and was a theater director, they settled down in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they raised their 3 kids. The eldest was Zachariah, 12 years of age, whom they fondly call as Zach. Eli, their middle child, was only 10 years old during that time, while their youngest, Willem, was around 3 years old. The couple loved nature and adventures, so they've always made it a point to go on nature trips with the whole family. Once in a while, they thought it would be best to spend some quality time alone with their little family, away from people, the noise and busyness of their daily lives, to simply just tune in with nature. August 17, 1996. Algonquin Provincial Park, southeastern part of Ontario, Canada. The little family was just having the time of their lives. Already about to end their 9-day canoeing trip, they decided to set up camp in one of the most remote areas of the park, just by the shore of Tom Thompson Lake. Stunned by the beautifully pink sunset over the horizon, Zach and Eli eagerly asked their dad if he could join them back on the canoe to bask in the view, as the golden hour slowly fades away. The boys knew their dad was tired from a whole day of canoeing, more so carrying the boat as they traversed over dry land just to get to their last camping location. However, at the same time, they knew very well that their parents are very particular about not going out on the canoe by themselves. And so, they tried to convince their dad and promised him they would do all the paddling. Tom and Tracy gave in and granted their irresistible request. After all, it was their last night. Zach and Eli excitedly jumped onto the canoe with their dad and set out for a sunset ride. Meanwhile, Tracy, along with their youngest son Willem, stayed behind in their camp to prepare a dinner for 5. However, a 6th guest came uninvited: an eastern wolf. All the while, without them knowing, a pair of ferocious eyes was quietly observing every move his potential targets made. His gaze was particularly fixed on the easiest prey, the 3-year-old Willem. Wolves, much like humans, live in close-knit family groups known as packs. A typical wolf pack is led by a dominant male and female, which are the parents, along with their offspring. The mother usually gives birth to 4 to 6 pups, which are safely sheltered in a den, often a small cave or a dugout burrow. While the pups are young, the adult wolves handle the hunting, bringing food back to the den to feed them. At around 8 weeks old, the pups are introduced to the outside world, joining other pack members in open areas where wolves gather to sleep, eat, and play. During these playful interactions, the pups start honing their instincts and learning essential hunting skills. By the time they reach 6 months, the young wolves begin to accompany the adults on hunts, closely following their lead as they develop into capable hunters themselves. Apparently, this lone wolf, lurking behind the thick bushes a few meters from the campsite, got separated from his pack. Without his pack, this adult wolf was left with no choice but to hunt alone in order to survive. In his solo quest for survival, he ended up watching and waiting for campers to leave campsites before he can step in and begin scavenging for leftover food. Getting to watch humans day in and day out, the wolf saw how harmless humans can be and how the younger ones can be the easiest preys. This survival instinct the wolf acquired from being alone heightened his predatory nature, and gradually, his natural fear of humans was slowly fading away. At the lake, as the two young boys enjoyed bonding with their father, they chanced upon fellow canoe adventurers who invited them to join their wolf call, an old tradition in the park where they would howl like wolves together. Tom and the kids happily joined and howled along at the top of their lungs. According to an expert, howling signals a wolf pack that another wolf might be intruding their own territory. True enough, their supposedly harmless wolf call alarmed the lone wolf. Thinking another wolf might come and steal his long-awaited meal, the wolf began advancing slowly toward Tracy and Willem. Tracy said she heard something and felt it was moving behind the woods, but the bushes were too thick for her to recognize what it was. In perfect timing, the three boys arrived back at the site and momentarily scared the wolf away. The skies were clear that night and everyone agreed it would be nice to end their 9-day adventure by sleeping under the stars. They no longer pitched their tents. Instead, Tracy arranged their sleeping mats on the ground. Hers and Tom's about 2 meters in front of the boys' mats, and she tucked Willem in between his two older brothers. In that moment, Zach was struck by the breathtaking beauty of the endless stars stretching across the sky. The vastness of the universe made him feel both awestruck and small, filling him with a quiet sense of wonder and a tinge of fear at how immense the world truly is. Meanwhile, Tracy remembered lying there beside Tom, the two of them reflecting on how this trip had brought them an unmatched sense of calm. Beneath that shimmering canopy, they talked about how they'd never felt more grounded, safe, and at peace. It was as if, for the first time in their lives, everything had fallen perfectly into place. But in a matter of minutes, this was all about to change. A few meters away from them was the man-eater ready to devour his sumptuous prey, the young and vulnerable. The night grew darker and the wolf was patiently yet eagerly waiting to make his next move. Zach found himself in a vivid dream, walking through a sunlit forest with his mom and dad, their laughter echoing as he followed them down the winding path. But suddenly, a sharp crushing pain exploded in his head, cutting through the dream like a knife. In reality, a ravenous wolf had already begun attacking, sinking its teeth into Zach's skull, drawn by his exposed position. Experts describe wolves as formidable predators, able to tear through muscle, tissue, and bone with terrifying force. Yet astonishingly, Zach remained locked in his dream, unaware of the brutal attack. In the dream, he felt an eerie sensation, like he was being dragged, with the trees above him rushing by in a blur. Meanwhile, the wolf was pulling his body, dragging him nearly 2 meters away from their campsite. Then, in a heart-pounding instant, Zach jolted awake. Pain and panic surged through him as he realized what was happening. With a frantic shout for help, he startled the wolf, causing it to retreat into the shadows of the forest, leaving Zach bloodied but alive. Startled awake by Zach's panicked cry, Tracy rushed to his side, heart pounding with fear. Trembling and disoriented, Zach tried to push her away, with blood pouring from his face and dripping steadily onto the ground. Gasping for breath, his voice strained as he tried to explain he couldn't breathe, overwhelmed by pain and shock. Tracy's eyes widened as she caught sight of a deep gash beneath his eye, and the warm blood already soaking her hands. Panic surged through her, but she fought to stay calm. Grabbing Zach's sleeping bag, she pressed it tightly against the wound, desperately trying to stop the relentless bleeding. Her mind raced, but her hands remained steady as she whispered reassurances, struggling to keep her fear in check. Tom woke up to this commotion and realized the horror that unfolded. He composed himself and without wasting time, started to scan the area near his wife and son. It was pitch black and yet his eyes caught the culprit. "It's a wolf," Tom exclaimed. The wolf stood just meters away from where the two were and kept watch. He screamed at the wolf as loud as he could and moved as big as he could, hoping he would scare it away. The wolf retreated into the woods, but still, nothing could escape his line of sight. They all began to panic as they knew full well that the wolf wasn't done with them just yet. Zach thought this was the end for their family. In no time, the wolf will surely come rushing back hungry for more human flesh. Tom grabbed the biggest paddle he could find and stood by the woods for a minute or so to scare the wolf further away from them. He then turned toward his son, brought the lamp closer to his face, and faced the dreadful truth. Zach's face was ripped open by this lone predator. Tom was overwhelmed by a mix of fear and fury as he witnessed his son's suffering. His senses seemed to sharpen as he prepared to confront the threat. With the wolf closing in again, Tom clutched the paddle with fierce resolve, determined to protect his family from the menace. Summoning unexpected courage, he ventured into the woods after the wolf. For a brief heart-stopping moment, Tracy and Zach feared Tom had disappeared. But then, he reappeared from behind the foliage, still wielding the paddle and locked in a desperate struggle with the wolf. Tom later described the experience as though he had developed night vision. He could perceive every subtle movement of the predator with astonishing clarity. Thankfully, for wolves, their own safety is top priority. Despite being hungry for more, the wolf withdrew into the woods. Tom and his family took this chance to run away. They hurriedly jumped onto their canoe just in time before the wolf came back. Relief overtook them as soon as they were on the water, knowing the wolf could no longer follow them. But the night was far from over. Escaping the wolf was just the start of their nightmare. Now, they faced the relentless ticking of the clock. Zach was losing blood rapidly, and every second counted. They needed to navigate their way through 2 lakes to reach a children's camp at Teepee Lake, the closest place where they could get help. Panic set in as Tom and Tracy paddled furiously, their focus entirely on reaching the camp before it was too late. Their canoe collided with a log, nearly capsizing them, but they fought to stay composed. Tracy dropped the paddles and took on the role of lookout, scanning the dark waters for obstacles, while Eli held the lamp to guide her. Frustration and helplessness surged as they struggled to find their way through the treacherous waters, each moment feeling like an eternity. At that moment, Zach felt overwhelmed, as if he might not make it through. Despite his young age, he resigned himself to the possibility of death, comforted by the thought that his family had escaped the wolf's deadly grasp. But the image of the immense grief his loss would bring to his loved ones sparked a fierce determination within him. Driven by the desire to spare them from that heartache, Zach fought with every ounce of strength he had left to stay awake and keep fighting for his life. After 3 hours on the water, they finally saw lights where the camp was. Tom shouted for help, alerted the camp director. Along with the camp nurse and doctor, they rushed to Zach as soon as their canoe docked on the lake's shore. The nearest hospital was still a 4-hour drive away from the camp, and it was a miracle Zach made it alive. He sustained multiple injuries, his nose broken in 5 pieces, overall requiring around 80 stitches in an emergency operation that lasted for more than 4 hours. Amazingly, the wolf missed his neck. Had the wolf bitten his neck, Zach wouldn't have made it. 5 days later, the wolf was shot by park authorities just around the site of the attack. An adult male wolf that weighed 25 kilograms. For Zach, beyond the physical injuries, it was the emotional trauma that greatly scarred him and the family. Yet surprisingly, he didn't hold a grudge on the wolf for what had happened. Wolves for him should still be regarded highly, but even so, wolves can be life-threatening. The world we live in is incredibly masterfully designed. The nature that we enjoy, the ferocious wild, and us humans are all intertwined in a vast chain called the ecosystem. Like the wolf separated from his pack, disrupt one's nature, break one link and the rest will fall tumbling down. In this horrifying story, humans may have become victims of disrupted nature, but in other animal attacks, humans can be the very ones breaking the chain. Either way, as in most horrifying stories, allow me to borrow the words of Tracy Delventhal. No one saw it coming. Thank you so much for making it this far. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more horrifying stories. Again, thank you, and see you on the next one.